Receptionist humiliates a simple black man, not knowing he owns the hotel. Malcolm Grant stared at the unopened letter on his kitchen table for the third morning in a row. The expensive cream-colored envelope bore his father's company logo, Grand Hospitality Group, embossed in gold lettering that seemed to mock the cramped studio apartment surrounding it. For 8 years, there had been nothing but silence between them. Now this. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Malcolm? The voice was older, friendlier than he remembered. It's your father. Malcolm's grip tightened on the phone. I got your letter. But you haven't opened it. It wasn't a question. Richard Grant had always possessed an uncanny ability to read people, even from a distance. I'm dying, son. The words hit Malcolm like a physical blow, though he tried to keep his voice steady. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Richard's laugh was bitter. After what I said to you 8 years ago, I wouldn't blame you for celebrating. Malcolm closed his eyes, remembering their last conversation. He'd been 24 then, fresh out of business school, full of idealistic plans to reform his father's empire from within. He'd proposed programs for underprivileged youth, fair wages for hotel staff, and community investment initiatives. Richard had listened with growing disgust before finally exploding. You want to give handouts to people who haven't earned them? You're embarrassing our family name with this bleeding heart nonsense. Either you learn to think like a Grant, or you're no son of mine. Malcolm had walked out that day, choosing his principles over his inheritance. He'd worked construction jobs, waited tables, and slowly built a small but successful consulting business helping family-owned restaurants improve their operations. He'd proven he could make it on his own, but the wound his father's rejection had left never fully healed. I need to see you, Richard continued, his voice barely above a whisper. There's something I have to show you, something I should have told you years ago. Can you meet me at the Grandview tomorrow? Private dining room 12, 7th floor. Noon. The Grandview. His father's crown jewel, the flagship hotel that had started the Grant Empire. Malcolm hadn't set foot in any of his father's properties since their falling out. Why now? Malcolm asked. Because I was wrong. The admission came out strangled, as if the words physically hurt. About a lot of things. Please, Malcolm. I may not have much time left. Against his better judgment, Malcolm found himself agreeing. After hanging up, he finally opened the letter. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address and time, but also something unexpected, a photograph he'd never seen before. It showed a young Richard Grant, maybe 25, standing outside a rundown diner with his arm around a black woman Malcolm didn't recognize. Both were smiling, and Richard looked happy. Genuinely happy in a way Malcolm had never seen. On the back, someone had written in faded ink, "For love, we would have given up everything. Sarah, 1987". Malcolm turned the photo over again, studying his father's face. Who was Sarah? And why had Richard kept this photo all these years? The next day, Malcolm arrived at the Grandview 15 minutes early, dressed in his only good suit. The hotel's lobby was as magnificent as he remembered: marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and an atmosphere of refined luxury that made even the air feel expensive. He'd loved this place as a child, before he understood what his family's wealth was built on. Private dining room 12 was small but elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Richard was already there, and Malcolm was shocked by how much his father had aged. The powerful man who had once dominated every room he entered now looked fragile, almost skeletal. "You came," Richard said, attempting to stand. "Stay seated." Malcolm took the chair across from him. "You said you had something to show me." Richard nodded toward a folder on the table. "Open it." Inside were financial documents, employee records, and what appeared to be investigation reports. Malcolm flipped through them, his confusion growing. "I don't understand. These are complaint reports about staff conduct, discrimination lawsuits, employee turnover rates." He looked up. "Dad, these numbers are terrible. Customer satisfaction is down 30% from 5 years ago." "Keep reading." Malcolm found a section labeled Front desk performance analysis. The reports detailed numerous incidents of staff treating guests differently based on their appearance, race, or perceived economic status. Security footage timestamps, witness statements, and formal complaints painted a picture of systematic prejudice throughout the hotel's operations. "This is happening in your hotels?" Malcolm asked, his voice rising. "And you're just documenting it?" Richard leaned forward, his eyes intense despite his frail appearance. "I'm dying, Malcolm. Pancreatic cancer. Maybe 3 months, the doctors say. And I need to know that when I'm gone, my life's work won't continue to perpetuate the very attitudes I..." He paused, touching the photograph Malcolm had received. "The attitudes that cost me everything that truly mattered. I don't understand. Sarah was my fiancée. We were going to be married in 1988. But my father, your grandfather, threatened to disown me if I went through with it. Said the family reputation couldn't survive me marrying a black woman." Richard's voice broke. "I chose the business over love, Malcolm. I chose money and status over the most incredible woman I'd ever met. And I've regretted it every single day since." Malcolm stared at his father, seeing him truly for the first time. "What happened to her?" "She moved away. Married someone else. Had a beautiful life, from what I heard. But I..." Richard gestured at the opulent room around them. "I built an empire that only made me realize how empty it all was. When you challenged me 8 years ago, when you wanted to change things, you were right. But I was too proud, too set in my ways to admit it. So why show me this now?" Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out a set of keys. "Because I'm offering you something I should have offered years ago. Not just an inheritance, but a chance to prove that real change is possible." Malcolm looked at the keys suspiciously. "What kind of chance?" "I want you to go undercover in this hotel. Dress down, blend in with regular guests. Experience firsthand how our staff treats people who don't look like they belong in a place like this." Richard's eyes blazed with something Malcolm hadn't seen since childhood: genuine passion. "If you can show me that it's possible to change this culture, to build something better, then I'll sign over controlling interest in the entire company to you. All of it." Malcolm's mind reeled. "And if I can't? Then I'll sell everything and donate the proceeds to civil rights organizations. Either way, the Grant legacy ends with me, or it becomes something Sarah would have been proud of." The weight of the offer settled over Malcolm like a heavy blanket. His father was essentially asking him to prove that a lifetime of prejudice and elitist attitudes could be overcome. It seemed impossible, yet. "There's one condition," Richard continued. "You can't reveal who you are to anyone. No using the Grant name, no pulling strings. You'll be just another guest, subject to whatever treatment the staff decides you deserve based on how you look and act." Malcolm picked up the keys, feeling their weight. "How long do I have?" "1 week. Check in tomorrow as a regular guest. Experience the hotel the way thousands of other people do. Then we'll meet again, and you can tell me whether my life's work is worth saving or deserving of burial." As Malcolm left the hotel that day, his mind was already racing with plans. He thought about Sarah, about the young man in the photograph who had chosen wealth over love, and about the chance to finally bridge the gap between his principles and his family legacy. He had no idea that within days, he would experience firsthand the very discrimination his father had built his empire upon, or that his response would change not just his own life, but the lives of everyone who worked within the Grant hospitality empire. The game was about to begin, and Malcolm Grant was ready to play by rules no one saw coming. 3 days later, Malcolm stood outside the Grandview Hotel wearing clothes he'd borrowed from his neighbor: a faded gray hoodie, worn jeans with a small hole near the knee, and scuffed sneakers that had seen better days. He deliberately skipped shaving and messed up his hair to complete the look. In his backpack was everything he needed for his week-long stay, including the reservation confirmation he'd made under his middle name, Malcolm James. Taking a deep breath, he pushed through the revolving glass doors into the opulent lobby. The contrast between his appearance and the surroundings was jarring, like a street musician wandering into a symphony hall. Several well-dressed guests glanced his way with barely concealed distaste. At the front desk, a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and immaculate makeup was checking in an elderly white couple. Her name tag read, Samantha Senior Guest Relations. She smiled warmly at them, her voice honey-sweet as she explained the hotel's amenities. And you'll absolutely love our spa services, Mrs. Henderson. We have a couples massage package that I think would be perfect for your anniversary celebration. Malcolm waited patiently behind the rope barrier, watching Samantha's performance. When the couple left with genuine smiles and hearty thanks, he stepped forward. Samantha's expression changed instantly. Her warm smile vanished, replaced by a look of barely concealed disgust as she took in his appearance. She didn't speak, just stared at him with raised eyebrows as if waiting for him to explain why someone like him was wasting her time. "Good afternoon," Malcolm said pleasantly. "I have a reservation under James." "Malcolm James." Samantha's fingers moved across her keyboard with deliberate slowness, her lips pursed in annoyance. "I don't see anything under that name." Malcolm pulled out his phone, showing her the confirmation email. "I booked it 3 days ago. Confirmation number GH4721. She barely glanced at the screen. "That doesn't mean anything. Our system shows no reservation." Her tone suggested this was somehow his fault. "And honestly, even if there was a booking, I'd need to verify payment method and identification. We've had issues with certain types of people using stolen credit cards." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Malcolm felt his jaw tighten but maintained his calm demeanor. "I can show you my ID and the credit card I used." Behind him, a well-dressed white man in an expensive suit approached the desk. Samantha immediately looked past Malcolm as if he'd become invisible. "Just one moment, sir," she said to the newcomer, her smile returning. "I'll be right with you." She turned back to Malcolm with visible irritation. "Look, I really don't have time for this. Why don't you try the Holiday Inn down the street? They might be more suitable for your budget." "I specifically want to stay here," Malcolm replied evenly. "And I have a confirmed reservation." Samantha sighed dramatically and began typing again, her acrylic nails clicking aggressively against the keys. After several long minutes, she spoke without looking up. "Oh, here it is. Buried in the system. 1 night, standard room. Actually, it's for a week. No, it's definitely 1 night. The system doesn't lie." She grabbed a key card and slammed it on the counter. "Room 237. Checkout is 11 a.m. sharp. And just so you know, we have strict noise policies here. This isn't the kind of place where you can play loud music or have parties." Malcolm noticed she'd given him a key card that looked different from the ones he'd seen her give to other guests. This one was clearly older, more worn. "Is there someone I could speak with about the hotel's booking policies? Maybe a manager?" Samantha's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me? I'd like to discuss some special arrangements for my stay. Maybe someone could give me a tour of the facilities, explain the services available?" She actually laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "A tour? What do you think this is, a youth hostel?" She looked him up and down again. "Let me guess, you're here about a job application? Well, I hate to break it to you, but we don't give tours to job applicants off the street. Especially ones who can't even dress appropriately for a business meeting." The businessman behind Malcolm cleared his throat impatiently. Samantha immediately brightened. "I'm so sorry for the wait, Mr. Patterson. How wonderful to see you again. Let me get you checked into the penthouse suite right away." As she began lavishing attention on Mr. Patterson, Malcolm picked up his key card and headed toward the elevators. But he didn't go far. Instead, he positioned himself near a pillar where he could observe the front desk while appearing to check his phone. Over the next hour, he watched Samantha interact with a dozen different guests. Her pattern was consistent and disturbing. Well-dressed white guests received warm smiles, detailed explanations of amenities, and genuine helpfulness. A young Latina woman in business attire was kept waiting for 10 minutes while Samantha found reasons to help other people first. An elderly black man asking about restaurant recommendations was given curt, minimal responses and told to check the brochures. But it was her interaction with a young black mother and her 2 children that made Malcolm's blood boil. The woman was clearly struggling. Her kids were tired, she was juggling luggage and trying to keep them quiet, and she just needed help finding her room. Instead of assistance, Samantha watched with visible annoyance as the woman tried to manage everything herself. When one of the children accidentally bumped into a decorative plant, Samantha stormed over. "Excuse me, but you need to control your children. This is a luxury hotel, not a playground. If you can't manage them, maybe you should find somewhere more appropriate to stay." The mother apologized profusely, her face flushed with embarrassment, as she gathered her children and hurried toward the elevators. Samantha returned to her desk with a satisfied smirk, muttering something to a coworker that made them both laugh. Malcolm had seen enough for one day. His father had been right. The discrimination wasn't hidden or subtle. It was blatant, systematic, and cruel. And somehow, he had to find a way to prove that this culture could be changed. As he finally headed to his room, Malcolm didn't notice Samantha watching him go, her expression calculating. She already decided he was trouble, and tomorrow, she planned to do something about it. Malcolm's assigned room was everything Samantha had intended it to be, a nightmare. Located directly above the hotel's loading dock, it shook every time a delivery truck arrived. The air conditioning unit clanged like a broken washing machine, and the thin walls meant he could hear every conversation from the hallway. He'd gotten maybe 3 hours of sleep. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the smell, a musty odor that suggested previous water damage that had never been properly addressed. When he'd called the front desk at 2 a.m. to report the issues, the night clerk had simply said, "Sorry, we're fully booked. Nothing we can do." Now, standing in the lobby the next morning, Malcolm felt genuinely exhausted. He'd spent the night taking notes on his phone, documenting everything for his eventual report to his father. But first, he wanted to observe more of the hotel's operations during peak hours. The morning rush was in full swing. Business travelers lined up for checkout, while new guests waited to check in. Malcolm positioned himself near the concierge desk, pretending to read a newspaper while watching the front desk operations. Samantha was in her element, effortlessly switching between syrupy sweetness for preferred guests and cold efficiency for everyone else. When a young white businessman complained about a minor issue with his room service, she immediately offered a room upgrade and complimentary breakfast. When an older Asian woman mentioned a similar problem, Samantha barely looked up from her computer screen and suggested she fill out a comment card. After an hour of observation, Malcolm approached the front desk during a brief lull. Samantha saw him coming and her expression immediately soured. "You again. I thought you were checking out this morning." "Actually, I wanted to ask about your customer service policies," Malcolm said politely. "I'm interested in understanding how the hotel ensures all guests receive equal treatment." Samantha's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me? I've been observing how different guests are treated, and I'm curious about the training programs for staff. Do you have specific protocols for? Who do you think you are?" Samantha's voice rose enough to attract attention from nearby guests. "You think you can just waltz in here and start questioning how we do our jobs?" Malcolm kept his voice calm and low. "I'm just asking about policies that should be publicly available. Customer service standards, complaint procedures, that sort of thing. Listen carefully." Samantha leaned across the counter, her voice dripping with disdain. "I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but I see right through you. You're probably one of those people who goes around trying to catch hotels doing something wrong so you can file a lawsuit or post bad reviews online." Several guests were now openly staring. Malcolm noticed a few staff members had also gathered, some looking uncomfortable, while others seemed entertained by the spectacle. "I'm simply a paying guest asking legitimate questions," Malcolm replied. "No, you're not." Samantha straightened up, her voice carrying across the lobby. "You're a troublemaker who's been lurking around here for 2 days, watching people, taking notes. I've seen you." She gestured dramatically. "Look at you, You don't belong in a place like this. You're making our real guests uncomfortable. A well-dressed couple nearby exchanged concerned glances and moved away. Malcolm felt heat rising in his cheeks but maintained his composure. I have every right to be here. I'm a registered guest. For one night, Samantha shot back. Which ended this morning. Security! Malcolm's heart began to race. I extended my stay yesterday evening. I spoke with the night clerk. There's no record of any extension. Samantha's smile was triumphant. Which means you're currently trespassing. A uniformed security guard approached, a large man named Rodriguez according to his name tag. He looked uncomfortable with the situation but clearly felt obligated to respond to Samantha's call. Is there a problem here? Rodriguez asked. Yes, Samantha said loudly, ensuring everyone in the lobby could hear. This individual has been loitering in our lobby for the past 2 days, bothering guests and staff. His checkout was this morning, and now he's refusing to leave. He's been taking pictures and asking inappropriate questions about our operations. I haven't taken any pictures, Malcolm protested. And I have an extended reservation. Show me your room key, Rodriguez said quietly. Malcolm pulled out the worn key card Samantha had given him. Rodriguez looked at it, then at Samantha, who shook her head dramatically. That key expired at checkout time. He's no longer authorized to be here. Sir, Rodriguez said, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. This is discrimination, Malcolm said, his voice finally showing strain. I'm being treated this way because of how I look, and you know it. Samantha gasped theatrically. How dare you play the race card? We treat all our guests equally. The fact is, you're not a guest anymore. You're a trespasser who's making people uncomfortable with your behavior. Malcolm looked around the lobby. Some guests were watching with obvious disapproval. Whether directed at him or the situation, he couldn't tell. Several staff members were whispering among themselves. A young housekeeper looked genuinely distressed, while a bellhop was smirking at the show. Please don't make this difficult, Rodriguez said softly. Just come with me. As Rodriguez escorted him toward the exit, Samantha called out loud enough for everyone to hear. Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to cause trouble where you don't belong. The lobby fell silent except for the clicking of Samantha's heels as she returned to her station, clearly satisfied with her performance. Malcolm walked out of the Grandview Hotel with his head held high, but inside, he was shaking with rage and humiliation. As the doors closed behind him, he could hear Samantha's voice carrying from the front desk. Some people just don't understand their place in the world. Standing on the sidewalk, Malcolm pulled out his phone and began typing detailed notes about everything that had just happened. His father had asked him to experience the hotel's true culture firsthand. Mission accomplished. But now came the hard part, proving that this poisonous environment could actually be changed. The next morning, Samantha arrived at work with a spring in her step. Yesterday's victory over the troublemaker had left her feeling particularly pleased with herself. As she prepared for her shift, she couldn't resist sharing the story with her colleague, Marcus, a junior front desk clerk who had witnessed the entire incident. You should have seen his face when security dragged him out. Samantha laughed, touching up her lipstick in her compact mirror. Some people really think they can just walk into a place like this and demand answers about how we run things. As if we owe him an explanation. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I don't know, Sam. The guy seemed pretty calm. Maybe he really did have questions about extending his stay. Oh please, Samantha waved dismissively. Did you see how he was dressed? That ratty hoodie, those cheap sneakers? He was obviously fishing for a lawsuit or trying to pull some kind of scam. Trust me, I've been doing this job for 5 years. I can spot trouble a mile away. She didn't notice the small device Marcus had placed under the counter. A digital recorder he'd started using after the previous day's incident had made him deeply uncomfortable. Something about the whole situation had felt wrong, and Marcus had decided to document things in case they escalated further. Besides, Samantha continued, warming to her favorite topic. People like that need to learn their place. This hotel has a reputation to maintain. We can't just let anyone waltz in here thinking they belong with our clientele. People like what? Marcus asked quietly. Samantha paused, realizing she'd said more than she intended. You know what I mean. People who clearly can't afford to be here, who dress inappropriately, who cause scenes. It's not about other things. It's about standards. But Marcus had worked with Samantha long enough to know exactly what she meant. He'd seen her treat well-dressed black guests with barely concealed hostility while fawning over any white customer with designer clothing. He'd watched her find excuses to delay service for Latino families while expediting everything for white guests. Yesterday's incident was just the most blatant example of what had been happening for months. What neither Samantha nor Marcus knew was that at that very moment, Malcolm was sitting in a conference room on the top floor of the Grand Hospitality Group headquarters, facing his father and 3 members of the board of directors. These are serious allegations, Malcolm, said Patricia Chin, the board's senior legal counsel. She was reviewing the detailed report Malcolm had compiled over his 3 days at the hotel. If what you're describing is accurate, we're looking at potential lawsuits, damage to our reputation, and serious legal liability. Malcolm nodded grimly. I documented everything. Times, dates, specific incidents. I also made audio recordings of several interactions. He paused, looking directly at his father. Dad, this isn't just isolated bad behavior. This is systematic discrimination that goes from the front desk all the way through to management. Richard Grant looked older than his 72 years as he absorbed his son's findings. The folder in front of him contained not just Malcolm's report, but also security footage that the hotel's head of security had pulled at Richard's private request. The footage corroborated every detail of Malcolm's account. The footage from the lobby security cameras shows the entire confrontation, said James Wright, the board's chairman. Ms. Collins, the front desk manager, clearly escalated the situation unnecessarily. But what's more concerning is that this appears to be part of a pattern. Dr. Sarah Okafor, the board's newest member and a specialist in organizational behavior, leaned forward. Malcolm, in your assessment, how deeply embedded is this culture? Are we talking about a few bad employees, or something more systematic? Malcolm had been dreading this question because he knew his answer would determine the fate of hundreds of employees. It's systematic, but not universal. I observed several staff members who seemed uncomfortable with what was happening. A housekeeper looked genuinely distressed during my confrontation with Samantha. A bellhop appeared to find it entertaining. Security seemed caught in the middle, following procedures but clearly unhappy about it. So there's hope for reform? Patricia asked. I think so, but it would require a complete culture overhaul starting from the top down. Zero-tolerance policies, mandatory sensitivity training, clear consequences for discriminatory behavior, and most importantly, leadership that actively models inclusive behavior. Richard finally spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. Malcolm, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. After everything you've experienced, everything you've seen, do you believe this company is worth saving? The room fell silent. Malcolm looked around the table at the 4 faces watching him, then back at his father. He thought about Sarah, the woman in the photograph who had loved a young Richard Grant before the world taught him to value profit over people. He thought about the housekeeping staff who worked thankless jobs for minimal pay while watching guests be treated differently based on the color of their skin. He thought about his own humiliation, but more importantly, he thought about all the guests who had endured similar treatment without having the power to do anything about it. Yes, Malcolm said finally. But only if we're willing to tear it down and rebuild it properly. Half measures won't work. This has to be complete transformation, and it has to start immediately. Richard reached into his briefcase and pulled out a set of documents. Then I have a proposal for all of you. Malcolm, you've proven your point better than I ever hoped, or feared, you would. The question now is whether you're willing to take on the challenge of implementing the changes you're proposing. He slid the papers across the table. I'm offering you controlling interest in the company, effective immediately. Not as an inheritance, but as a mandate for change. The board will support you completely, and we'll start with the Grandview as a pilot program. Malcolm stared at the documents, his heart racing. Everything he'd ever dreamed of, the chance to build something meaningful, to honor his principles while carrying on his family's legacy, was right there in front of him. When do we start? He asked. Richard smiled, the first genuine smile Malcolm had seen from his father in 8 years. Tomorrow. But first, I think it's time for a surprise staff meeting at the Grandview. There are some people there who need to learn that actions have consequences. The emergency staff meeting was called for 3 p.m. sharp. Word spread through the Grandview like wildfire. All department heads and front-of-house staff were required to attend in the hotel's main conference hall. No exceptions, no excuses. Samantha primped nervously in the staff bathroom, checking her appearance one final time. Emergency meetings usually meant one of two things: either someone was getting promoted, or someone was in serious trouble. Given her exemplary performance record, especially her recent handling of that troublemaker, she felt confident it was the former. "Any idea what this is about?" asked Jessica, one of the newer front desk clerks, as they walked toward the conference hall together. "Probably announcing the quarterly bonuses," Samantha replied with false confidence. "Or maybe they're finally going to make me assistant manager. About time, if you asked me." The conference hall was already packed when they arrived. Nearly 40 staff members filled the rows of chairs, their conversations creating a nervous buzz that echoed off the walls. At the front of the room stood a long table with several chairs, all currently empty. At exactly 3 p.m., the side door opened, and Richard Grant walked in, followed by 3 people Samantha recognized as board members. But it was the fourth person who made her blood run cold. Walking beside the company owner, dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit with a crisp white shirt and burgundy tie, was the same man she had humiliated and ejected from the hotel just 2 days ago. His hair was professionally styled, his posture confident, and he carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "Oh my God!" Jessica whispered. "Is that?" Samantha couldn't speak. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. This couldn't be real. The scruffy troublemaker in the hoodie couldn't possibly be standing next to Richard Grant like they were equals. "Good afternoon, everyone," Richard began, his voice carrying easily through the silent room. "Thank you all for gathering on such short notice. I know this is unusual, but we have some important matters to discuss." He gestured to Malcolm, who stepped forward with calm authority. Several staff members were whispering now, recognizing him from his previous visit but clearly confused by his transformation. "Before we begin," Malcolm said, his voice steady and professional, "I want to acknowledge that some of you may recognize me from earlier this week. I was here as a guest, an undercover assessment of our hotel's service standards and treatment of customers." The whispers stopped. The room became so quiet that the humming of the air conditioning seemed deafening. "What I discovered," Malcolm continued, "was deeply troubling. Over the course of 3 days, I witnessed systematic discrimination against guests based on their appearance, race, and perceived economic status. I saw staff members treat certain customers with warmth and respect while showing others outright hostility and disdain." Samantha felt the blood draining from her face. Around the room, staff members were shifting uncomfortably, some looking guilty while others appeared genuinely surprised. Malcolm walked to the presentation screen at the front of the room. "Rather than make vague accusations, I think it's better to show you exactly what I observed." The screen flickered to life, showing security footage from the lobby. Samantha watched in horror as her own behavior played out in high definition. There she was, treating the elderly white couple with exaggerated kindness. There she was, making the young Latina woman wait while serving other customers. And there, oh God, there she was publicly humiliating the black mother with her children. But the worst was yet to come. The footage switched to Malcolm's final confrontation with her. Watching it from this perspective, with the sound enhanced, her behavior looked even worse than she remembered. Her voice was shrill and accusatory, her body language aggressive and dismissive. When she called security and made her grand pronouncement about him not belonging there, Several staff members in the conference room actually gasped. This footage represents just a small sample of what I observed, Malcolm said as the screen went dark. But it illustrates a pattern of behavior that is not only morally reprehensible but also legally dangerous for this company. Richard stood up. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet my son, Malcolm Grant. As of today, he is assuming controlling interest in Grant Hospitality Group, with full authority to implement whatever changes he deems necessary. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Samantha felt like she was going to be sick. Malcolm Grant, the owner's son, the man she had treated like garbage, humiliated in front of dozens of people, and had forcibly removed from the hotel. Malcolm has my complete support, Richard continued, and the full backing of our board of directors. The culture that allowed yesterday's incident to occur ends today. Malcolm stepped forward again. Let me be very clear about something. The behavior demonstrated in that footage, and the attitudes that enabled it, have no place in any organization I lead. We will be implementing immediate changes, mandatory diversity and sensitivity training, revised customer service protocols, and a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. His eyes found Samantha in the crowd. When their gazes met, she saw no anger or vindictiveness, just calm, professional resolve. Somehow, that made it worse. Some of you may be wondering about your jobs, Malcolm continued. Let me address that directly. Those who showed kindness and professionalism to all guests will not only keep their positions but will be considered for advancement opportunities. Those who contributed to creating a hostile environment for certain guests will find their employment terminated effective immediately. Samantha's world crumbled around her. 5 years of her life, her career, her reputation, all destroyed in a matter of minutes. And the worst part was knowing that she had done it to herself. Ms. Collins, Malcolm said, his voice cutting through her despair. Please see me after this meeting. As the conference continued around her, Samantha sat frozen in her chair, finally understanding that actions truly did have consequences, and hers were about to change everything. The conference hall slowly emptied as staff members filed out in stunned silence, but Samantha remained seated, paralyzed by the magnitude of her situation. Around her, a few colleagues whispered sympathetically, while others deliberately avoided eye contact. Marcus, the junior clerk who had witnessed her bragging that morning, approached hesitantly. Sam, he said quietly, pulling out his phone. I think you should know, I recorded our conversation this morning. The one where you were talking about what happened. Samantha looked up at him with hollow eyes. Why? Because something felt wrong about the whole thing. I've been watching how you treat certain guests for months, and yesterday finally pushed me over the edge. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. I was planning to report it to HR, but now... He gestured toward the front of the room where Malcolm was speaking with board members. It doesn't matter anymore, Samantha whispered. Nothing matters anymore. But Marcus shook his head. Actually, it does matter. Because if you're willing to admit what you did was wrong, really wrong, maybe there's a chance for you to learn from this. Change even. Before Samantha could respond, Malcolm approached their small group. Up close, his transformation was even more striking. This wasn't just about expensive clothes. His entire demeanor radiated the quiet confidence of someone born to leadership. Ms. Collins, he said formally, could we speak privately? They moved to a small alcove near the conference room. Samantha expected anger, vindictiveness, perhaps even gloating. Instead, Malcolm's expression was thoughtful, almost sad. I want you to know that firing you gives me no pleasure, he began. But what happened over the past few days can't be ignored or minimized. I know, Samantha whispered, tears finally starting to fall. I don't know why I acted that way. I mean, I do know, but I don't understand how I became that person. Malcolm studied her carefully. Tell me. Growing up, my family struggled financially. When I got this job, it felt like I'd finally made it to the other side, the side with money and status and respect. Her voice cracked. I guess I started believing that protecting that status meant keeping certain people out. as if their presence somehow diminished what I'd achieved. And now? Samantha looked up at him through her tears. Now I realize I became exactly the kind of person who would have treated teenage me the same way I treated you. I'm ashamed, Mr. Grant. Truly ashamed. Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. Samantha, may I call you Samantha? What you did was wrong. It was hurtful, discriminatory, and completely unacceptable. But I also understand how easy it is for institutions to corrupt good people when they don't have proper leadership and accountability. He pulled out a business card and handed it to her. This is the contact information for a friend of mine who runs diversity and inclusion training programs. If you're genuinely committed to changing, not just sorry because you got caught, but truly committed to becoming better, I'd recommend starting there. Samantha stared at the card in disbelief. Why would you help me? Because my father spent 40 years building a company culture that taught people like you to think the way you did. Firing you doesn't solve that problem, it just moves it somewhere else. Real change means giving people the chance to grow, even when they don't deserve it. As Malcolm walked away, Samantha clutched the card like a lifeline, understanding for the first time that redemption might still be possible. Meanwhile, Malcolm gathered the remaining staff members, those whose behavior had shown promise. Maria, the housekeeper who had looked distressed during his confrontation. Rodriguez, the security guard who had clearly hated what he was asked to do. Marcus, who had tried to document wrongdoing. Jessica, the new front desk clerk who treated everyone with equal respect. You four and several others showed me that good people can survive in a toxic environment without becoming toxic themselves. Malcolm told them. I'd like to offer you leadership roles in rebuilding this hotel's culture. Over the following weeks, the Grandview transformed. Malcolm implemented comprehensive sensitivity training, established clear protocols for guest interactions, and created anonymous reporting systems for discrimination. He hired a diverse management team and instituted regular culture assessments. But the changes went deeper than policy. Malcolm spent hours each day walking the floors, talking with staff, and observing guest interactions. He learned the names of housekeeping staff and maintenance workers. He instituted profit-sharing programs and created advancement pathways for hourly employees. 3 months later, Malcolm stood in the same employee entrance where security had escorted him out. But this time, he was welcoming a group of local high school students for a hospitality career workshop, young people who looked just like he had that day in his hoodie and jeans. As he watched them explore the hotel with excitement and wonder, Malcolm thought about Sarah, the woman in his father's photograph. He thought about the young man his father had once been, before fear and prejudice had hardened his heart. And he thought about the power of second chances, not just for institutions, but for people. The Grandview Hotel still gleamed with luxury and elegance, but now it also radiated something it had lacked for decades: the warmth of genuine hospitality extended to every guest, regardless of how they looked or where they came from. Malcolm Grant had finally come home, not to claim an inheritance, but to build a legacy worthy of the name.